Well, hello and welcome to our G Plus Google Plus Hangout for tonight. We're happy to have you with us, whether you're watching live on the G Plus event page or watching the YouTube video or listening later via the Stitcher or iTunes podcast. As you know, our Hangouts have switched to Thursdays at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We're here every Thursday night. If you can't make it live, we encourage your comments and questions on the event page before the event, after the event, and there's no reason to miss out on a Hangout you're interested in because they're all recorded to our YouTube channel and converted to Stitcher and iTunes podcasts. And you can subscribe to our newsletter at ihomeschoolnetwork.com/newsletter to stay informed of upcoming Hangouts. For those of you watching live, welcome. Please pop over to the G Plus page to leave comments and questions, and our production manager, Marlene Griffith, will be bringing those in. Wave hi, Marlene. Tonight we've got Kendra and Andy Fletcher as our special guests, and we're going to be talking about keeping it real in homeschooling, having realistic expectations, how homeschooling can affect a marriage, and just all kinds of other nitty-gritty topics that we sometimes gloss over. So I want everybody here to take a minute to say hi. How about we start with Kendra?
Hi there. Really happy to be here tonight, and I'm hoping to give everyone just a lot of encouragement that nobody's home is perfect, and kids cheat on math, things like that. So we'll have those conversations.
All right, and how about Andy? You want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Fletch, and I am the Shrek to Kendra's Fiona. And if I took off the hat, you guys would see, a bald head and the big Shrek head. I'm excited to be here as the only representative of the married husbands. So excited to talk about how homeschooling can affect a marriage. So excited to be here.
And let's see, we have Brenda.
Hi guys, I'm Brenda from schoolingamonkey.com, and we like to talk about keeping things easy over there. I have two little girls. One's a toddler right now. She's just about to turn 2, and she's into everything. So we're definitely really excited to learn about what these other moms do to keep things real, because we definitely need to take it on a minimalist level these days. But, we're looking forward to hearing what other people have to say about keeping it real.
And Heidi?
Hey there, Heidi here from Starts at 8, and the reference to the cheating math was my none and only. I have an 11-year-old who's giving me a run for my money in the math department, and so it makes me feel a little better when I get to hear other moms that are kind of walking the same path. So it's exciting for me to be here and hear what everyone else has to say and put in my 2 cents about how we're keeping it real over here.
And Shannon, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Shannon. I blog over at middlewaymom.com. I blog a lot about high school, and I've just started talking about preschool as we're getting there. So I have a 14-year-old, a 3-year-old, or now 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So there's a lot of keeping it real at our house too. So glad to be here.
And I forgot to tell you, my name is Jamie Worley, and I blog over at cjamieblog.com. And the kids I've still got at home are 5, 7, and 14. So we have kind of an age range there, and there's all kinds of unpretty stuff happening in our house too. So let's get to chatting. Let's see, what are some unrealistic expectations that we or homeschoolers in general tend to have? Anybody jump in?
I've been homeschooling our kiddos since 1997. We have 8 children, and the oldest 2 are adults, and the youngest is a little 6-year-old. And so I feel like I've been doing this forever. But in the beginning, there really weren't blogs yet, and there weren't all the sites there are now, but there was the Well-Trained Mind boards, and there were the Sunlight board, and people would share things and what was going on in their homes, and it was so easy to read what they were doing and think, oh, I'm just missing the being to my outing or whatever. And I think just sometimes by way of encouragement of other people, blogs, sites, homeschool groups, co-ops, whatever, it's easy for us to hear what somebody else is doing in their home and think, oh, I'm not doing that. I must not be, I must not be a good homeschooling mom, which is entirely not true. So I think that sometimes just seeing what somebody else is doing, or going on Pinterest. Need I even mention all the fabulous homeschool rooms and ideas, there. It's just very easy to think we're not doing as good a job.
And just to cut in a little bit too, I recently posted on the blog about how I think a lot of us expect that the kids will want to do the work. Like, we hand-picked their curriculum for them. And then when they're like, oh, I don't want to do this, and you're like, you know how much time I spent picking like this history curriculum or whatever it is. And so we have this expectation that they're going to love it every day. And even if you love your job, like a full-time job, you're still not going to love it every day. So I think that's also an unrealistic expectation that a lot of people have when you start fighting your kid to work on something. And I hear even unschoolers that talk about, well, you have to do something. You can't just, sit around and play video games. You have to do something during these hours. So I think just being honest that not everybody wants to work all the time, and that goes for all of us, moms too.
I personally like the expectation that everybody thinks your kids should be smarter than theirs. That everywhere you go, it's like open season to quiz your children about where they're at or what they're doing, or, and it's this expectation that, well, just because you're homeschoolers, your kids should be smarter, and well, are they up to grade level? So let's see how many quizzes I can pull out to make sure that, your kid can answer them. And for me, I find that, and I said this before we went live here, I worry about how people perceive, the fact that, like I said, right now we're going through this thing where my son decided to skim through his math and not really do it, so we're having to redo. And so I even put that own expectation on myself sometimes, that like, oh, it's my fault, or I should have seen it, or I should have done this because I'm the mom and I'm the homeschooling mom. And so I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in this expectation, or unrealistic expectation, that our kids should be advanced or all on top of everything because, we're home with them and that's what we're doing.
I think one of the things that we tend to do too is, or at least I do, is I set myself up for unrealistic expectation of just having overall good days most of the time. And the fact is, we're with our kids all the time. And that's great, but it also, can be hard. And it's easy to, like I watch my neighbor, like have all the little cookies, fresh baked cookies ready for the kids when they get off the school bus, and I'm thinking, man, I should do something like that. And then I'm like, no, I'm with them all day long. I already made them breakfast and lunch, and but it's like it's Pinterest stuff and all those happy little things that what Good Housekeeping and all the other little lovely sugar cookie things at this time of year and all that craziness, that it's just, we make things way too hard on ourselves.
Yeah, I would have to agree. When I first started homeschooling, my daughter was 9 or 10, and that's a really hard age because they act like they're on TV all the time. Everything's goofy. They might like skip down the hallway, and then if you didn't like say something about it, like, did you see that? And then they do it again. Like you're constantly watching TV, and it just it got to the point where, and she was fine. She wasn't like acting out. I'm like, how about we have lunch separately? Because we would like sit together and have lunch. So like we were literally together from the time we woke up to the time we went to bed. And I just needed like that 30-minute break of, I'm going to read a book where like an adult wrote it. Basically like my only adult conversation, throughout the whole day. So yes, I agree very much.
Yeah, afternoon quiet time has saved my life. Uh, we all go to our corners and read or do something quietly, and that makes me a much more nice mama. Um, Kendra, Fletch, y'all want to jump in with some great stuff here?
Yeah, I would say one thing I've noticed, just after, well, our oldest is 21, and I don't know if Kendra said it, but 8 kids from 21 down to 5, and we've just been doing this for a lot of years. And when it comes to comparisons, the first thing that I see from homeschool moms, at least as I'm kind of sitting back listening, the first thing is they compare themselves, for years it was comparing themselves to the public schools. Are we doing as well as the public school does? So we kind of already start there as homeschoolers because we're already trying to prove ourselves. And so you start going down that path. And then it's, well, what are they doing? And I swear the last couple years, the advent of social media, and I think, Jamie, I think you just said it, Pinterest, suddenly it's like, well, I'm doing this curriculum, or look at this great, it's craft projects, which if you're not a craft person, I love the Pinterest fails, because that's like what I do a lot of the times. It just doesn't look like anything else. So, I think we start off in a comparison, and then we just get into it, and we've just seen people ripped apart by it because they just can't hold up. And if we were real and we actually started talking this way and said, I just can't do it, and then swept in and told each other that's okay, I think we'd be a lot better off. But we're so prideful to say, to just admit that sometimes it's not working. We've joked about the cheating on math. I mean, I've found kids that a semester in had been lying to me all along, but I'm so afraid to tell that to anybody because it looks like I'm doing a bad job, and we're just afraid to talk about it. So I think we can get past that and just start sharing that we all have failures. It might be a little bit easier. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things early on in, at least in Christian homeschooling circles, was this idea, and then we find out, and so there's that reality that we need to, we just need to realize that that nobody's perfect, none of our kids are perfect, we're not perfect, and we're just going to love them and point them to Jesus. We're just going to point them to the only hope that we have, and that's really the answer for all of us. There's so many opportunities in imperfection to look at our kids and say, oh my goodness, honey, really, you lied to me all semester long about not doing your math, or you cheated on that, or I have a daughter who consistently pretends that she's done her chores but doesn't do them until I figure it out or find out later on. And it's an opportunity to say, oh, okay, this is why you need Jesus. And then I blow it, I yell at a child, or whatever the circumstance is, and I say, oh, do you see how mommy needs Jesus? Do you see this? Like, this is where grace just sweeps in, and we can just point each other back to what our only hope is. Otherwise, if we're looking to ourselves, or we're looking to these standards that we're setting for ourselves, we're never going to meet them.
Great points, Kendra. How about y'all, what experience have you had in how being a homeschool mom or dad, Fletch, has affected your marriage, good or bad?
Well, I'll jump in again. This is a topic that comes up a lot on HomeschoolingIRL.com when we're doing the podcast, because I love to be very real about marriage issues. And I did a whole series with some dads where it was what every homeschool dad wishes their wife knew. And we did a lot of stuff off air, but one of the conversations that came through was just wanting their wife back. I mean, I've heard this over and over again, and I'm just really blatant, really honest that your homeschooling mom, typical family, homeschooling mom is doing the homeschooling, dad's away at school or away at work. You come home, mom's been with the kids all day, she's been working all day, you get done, have dinner, and then she's doing some lesson planning or planning something, a menu or something, and by the time you both flop down and get down to who you were again, you're both dead and crashing for the day. And so it affects a marriage because sometimes it just never ends. I mean, date nights are planning for a curriculum. And there are times I just say, I want to talk about you. I don't want to talk about history, whatever, scheduling. I want to talk to you. I want my wife back. And that's not just me. That's just some of the men I talk to in general. So I think that's one. Kendra, what about you? How about the idea that we never have people out of our bedroom? I mean, hello.
Yeah. Oh, you know, you think you get these adult kids, they turn 18, they go to college, they move out. No, then they find their way into your bedroom after 11 p.m. every night to discuss the deep issues of life. And then our little brain-injured 6-year-old is in my bed, you know, before 7 a.m. every morning. So, yeah.
And you know, Fletch, something you were saying.
It's a really 24-hour, 7-day, 365.
I'm trying to see if Kendra's going to catch up there. Fletch, I was thinking about what you had said with wanting to actually have a conversation about something other than curriculum or whatever. And sometimes I feel myself like I would love to talk about other things, but that is the only thing in my brain is all the things that I'm doing, you know, with the kids and with the house and all this stuff. And I think, you know, probably all of us, I would venture to guess, if someone asked you, you know, to say one main thing about yourself, well, I'm speaking for y'all, so I won't do that. But I think labeling ourselves as homeschool mom is right up there. And, you know, we are more than that, but golly, it's easy to forget that.
I was just joking about that tonight. Somebody made a comment on my personal Facebook page when I was talking about watching Peter Pan with the kids, and they made some comment how they were recording it because, you know, their kids had to go to bed, unlike us homeschoolers. And I said, well, you know, actually us homeschoolers would like to have a life without the children sometimes too. And you know, we have a teenager for the first time. She's 15, but I mean, it's our first teenager. And I joke with people, and I find that it's very common, but she comes alive at like 10:30 at night. Suddenly she's our best friend. She wants to snuggle on the couch. She wants to have a conversation, where she gave me dirty looks and like sputtered at me all day. And so, you know, it's this fine line between, I would like to have my own space, I would like to have my husband, but can I push my teenager away at 10:30 at night, you know? And so, you know, so I was just commenting today how, yeah, we're homeschoolers and we can stay up later, but my husband and I literally do not sit on the couch or get near each other until at least 9:30, 10 o'clock, sometimes later. And, you know, he's got to get up and go to work at 6 in the morning. And, you know, I get up a little later than that, but I'm with the kids all day. And so we do find, and, you know, it's fine. We've been trying to find that balance of, yes, we are a married couple and we are important, and, you know, but without sacrificing the kids in that too. And I definitely find that we are at that place where we are struggling with that, and just in the sense of juggling it all. Like, okay, where do we find the time? How do we, you know, say enough is enough? And so with our teenager, it's like, you know, we'll sit with her, do whatever we're going to do for half an hour, 45 minutes, but then it's like, okay, honey, we've had a conversation now, but we need to cut this off. Mom and Dad need a little time. You know, but yeah, it is tough to find yourself and your marriage amidst everything else that's going on in the house.
Brenda, you haven't been very chatty. Do you have anything you wanted to throw in with, you've got a little one, right?
I do. Although we have a very similar problem with the late night activity, actually. She's decided that she is apparently a night owl. Our 2-year-old is very active at 10 p.m. at night. We've been having a hard time getting her to sleep before like 10:30 p.m. But we were finding, my husband and I, we were actually both homeschooled growing up. So I think we might have a slightly different perspective on like the homeschool marriage balance, because he was also homeschooled, so I feel like he sort of like just kind of lets me run with it, which is nice in a lot of ways, but then in other ways I'm like, well, I do want to talk about this. So it's we have to find that balance of like talking about it versus not talking about it, because I think since we came from similar backgrounds, it's easier to just ignore it and consider it as a normal part of life. But one of the things that we found recently that has helped us a lot is we're so busy, and he works crazy hours, and I'm home all day trying to wrangle kids into bed till 10:30, and so we're exhausted at the end of the day. But we recently made a pledge to try to do one nice thing specifically for our spouse a day. So if we're doing one nice thing that's just for them, that really seems to make a big attitude change as far as like our marriage relationship goes, because you're there looking for positive things. And I think that really sort of improves my mood for everything, just looking for ways to be nice versus just trying to drag through the day, I guess. That's been a really positive benefit in my attitude and dealing with kids and everything. So that's my tip of the day.
I love that. That's a great tip. Actually, Brenda, I know that one of the topics that Kendra and Fletch talk about sometimes is the experience that homeschool grads have had. And since you were one and your husband too, what are some good and maybe bad, or nitty-gritty, whatever, things from your experience?
Well, for me personally, I feel like the experience overall was mainly positive. I loved being homeschooled. I actually was able to graduate high school in 3 years because I did it all at home, and that was amazing to me. I loved that. When I got to college, it was a bit of a shock, though, because they wouldn't let you race ahead or anything. So I was like, man, this seems like a really slow pace. So it was actually a bit of an adjustment. And I think that's probably the main thing about me growing up in Texas, and for my husband too. We didn't have forced standardized testing. So as far as like perhaps a downside of being a homeschool high school graduate is if you're not taking regular testing, it can be a bit of a shock once you get to college, realizing that you have a test every couple weeks. That's like, I don't know, I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I was like really dramatic about tests and everything. I was like, oh, I have to get like a 98 or else I'm a horrible person. So, but definitely, I've enjoyed the whole homeschooling process, which is one of the main reasons that I decided to homeschool my kids as well, is just to give them that same experience of having the freedom to sort of choose what you're able to do. If you want to learn something specific, you can. You don't have to learn about, I don't know, pig anatomy every single year for like 6 years. You can move on to other things. And I think that the freedom of being able to choose what you learn is really one of my favorite aspects. And I think as an adult, it's really helped me to be more successful in life and to think outside of the box a little bit, which really kind of helps in like being more of an entrepreneur, or just coming up with things, being more creative in the workplace. Just gives you a better advantage, I think, in general, than a child who's stuck in the same system with other kids and they have the same sort of like regimented procedure. And I think it kind of stifles creativity to some extent.
That's awesome to hear your good words there. Fletch and Kendra, what are some conversations you've had with some homeschool grads, or experience from, you have at least a couple that you've graduated already, haven't you?
We do. And our experience interviewing a couple of homeschool grads for our episode on what homeschool grads, are saying was overwhelmingly positive. But there were some things that they addressed that I think, like Brenda said, you hit college or you hit the workforce and whoa, wait a minute, I can't, there are some things that homeschooling allows that an institutionalized setting doesn't, or a workplace doesn't. And so you just make those adjustments, but you have to make those adjustments in life all the time, no matter whether you were homeschooled or not. They just maybe are unique to homeschooling.
Yeah, we also had some, we gave them free rein to say whatever they wanted to. And I was, a few of them did share some thoughts that those fears that we've heard over the years that, you know, it's too restrictive or it's too limiting. Some said that, you know, I wish I had had more experience. I wish my parents had engaged me in some of the topics that I was going to hit in the world at a younger age, and that was pretty clear. We did a follow-up after that one on talking to your kids about sex, kind of in the homeschool community. Just that we had seen that maybe we hadn't done a great job of that ourselves. I mean, Kendra and I can be real with you and say our first 3 boys just said, "Hey, you blew it. You didn't get to us quick enough on this topic. You didn't give us enough details." And the world was really good at filling in the gaps, which, you know, we just kind of took a breath and said, we can't be the only ones. So from that grads episode and from that other one, we found that some parents are just avoiding some of the tougher topics because they don't have the tools to talk about them. And so some of these grads just said, you know, and I'm not going to list them out here, but they're just any topic that you think maybe you should be talking about with your kids, you should. I mean, and it's we just need to break down some of those things that we're afraid to talk about and get into it. And they were very clear to tell us that their parents had missed the boat on a few of them. And the second thing, I think, Kenj, one was that a lot of these were in some really rigid Christian homes, and that had limited them as they kind of went out into the world. They were in such a legalistic home that they needed to, when they got out, they suddenly had this freedom they couldn't handle, or they just didn't know what to do with.
Yeah, or didn't even really understand cultural references, or weren't able to enter the conversation initially, and felt like they had to catch up in a lot of ways. And I think now what we personally have learned, because we were definitely those parents with our older kids, is to not be afraid to have those conversations. You know, to have those tougher conversations as your kids can handle it. Obviously, you're not going to sit your 3-year-old down and, you know, and discuss what's going on in Ferguson. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna know when your child is at a point that you can have those conversations, but just don't be afraid to have them, and to talk about what God says on the subject, talk about what your beliefs are on the subject, talk about what the world is saying, and just, you know, have that whole conversation with them.
Kendra and Fletch, I keep interchanging Andy and Fletch. They also have a free ebook, Raising Boys, 10 Simple Tips. I think Marlene can share that link on the Google Plus page, but that kind of goes along. I'm sure some of that is from the conversations you were just talking about having with your oldest kids, the oldest boys. That's an awesome one. I only have one little boy, but I could use a little input on that. I'm new to the boy mom world.
Well, as a dad of 5, there's a quote I live by, and normally I'll come home and tell Kendra, it's always something. From trying to start a fire out in the lawn to boys peeing on a bedroom wall, it's always something in our house with these boys. And if you want a good laugh at what it's like to raise boys, we have an episode on, it's just called Boys. And it's one of those where you just kind of hit your head. What's the other quote I say? When the boys leave, I always say, quick, to the idiot mobile, because they're probably going to be doing something that isn't the wisest.
Yeah, I'm in the South here, and so the equivalent there is not the idiot mobile, but, you know, anything preceded by "Hey y'all, watch this" is never going to be good. Well, see, I know y'all got some things to share. Jump in.
Well, I can jump in and say also that we hit the topic of girls right after we hit the topic of boys. So if you are a girl mom and dad, then you know, we discussed that too, and sort of this idea that I think culturally there's sort of like, not culturally, but maybe in some circles there's this idea that we're just really letting the girls bide their time until they get married. And so we talk about that too, like what are we educating our girls for, and what are we preparing them to do in their lives. So that was that was really interesting and fun. There's we can laugh about, especially as they're getting into tween and teen years. Whew, our girls right now are 15, 13, and 11. And I actually texted Fletch from the dressing room at Kohl's one day, and I said, "You better hope I don't die," because clothes shopping with these three girls is horrible. So, you know, those kind of those little issues too, and a lot of the things I think that come up with those girls are identity issues. They're trying to figure out who they are and what their life is about and what's important when our culture is just bombarding them with messages of their worth and their value being in how they look and how they perform. And so we tackled that one too and tried to do it with a lot of transparency and real life talk.
You know, when we're talking about being real, one of the other things I wanted to say is, you know, as a dad, sometimes you're just there's two things. You're afraid to apologize or confess, you know, that you did something wrong to your kids, and moms too. But I think dads kind of can struggle with this. And the second thing is to really be willing to be humble and find out where you blew it. So when we're talking about homeschool grads, you know, having those conversations with our sons, they're not always easy to go into. But you know, our top three are boys, and just to be able to say, you know, I remember we had our one son on microphone. I said, would you share with us maybe where we blew it? And then having to listen to that and go, oh, okay, well, you know, sometimes 21-year-old sons can find every little detail that you did wrong in life, and that's fine. But to kind of filter that out and really say, hey, you know what? Let's be real. We did blow it on some things, and let's redeem that time now, or let's redeem some of those choices we made. So you know, just to encourage people, like transparency is really scary sometimes, and I would encourage, you know, some of you with younger kids, as they get older, just really be willing to listen to what they say and be humble enough to say, hey, maybe we did blow it, or you know, maybe we do need to make some changes here.
Heidi, I think you were gonna. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just stepping all over. Go ahead, Shannen.
Well, no, I just wanted to tack onto that too. That I noticed when my daughter started out in public school, like I was able to show her my best face in the evenings and the weekends because I had that time during the day where, you know, I got to be me. I had my own job and, you know, these type of things. When we started homeschooling, well, she sees me all day. So that means she sees when I'm like going to break down or when I'm just frustrated. And the furthest you can really go is the bathroom, and that's not really hiding from anything. So I think when the kids tell you, you know, these are the areas where you blew it, and these are the things that you did wrong, we also have to understand, like, these people are with us all day, and so they're going to know everything about us. And most kids, at least like in this one book that I read, in the teenage years, they're really trying to learn what perfection is. And so when they see that their parents are not perfect, they pick that apart because for so long they thought that their parents were perfect. And so this is now like disappearing in their mind that their parents are perfect and they can't make any mistakes. And so they start grabbing onto this and, oh, well, you do this and you do that and you do this. And it seems to be a lot of struggle that a lot of parents have when their kids are teenagers. But I think as homeschoolers we might get it a little bit amplified since they do see us, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, and not just the evenings and weekends.
Okay, Heidi, did you still have something you wanted to say?
Can't unmute. There we go. Apparently I can't unmute my microphone tonight, though, folks. There we go. You know, I have so much to say now. Fletch was talking about the girls and the boys, and I have a teenage girl at home who, you know, who is all about the clothing. She spends a lot of time with her public school friends. She's a competitive gymnast, so it's all about body image. So that's something that we really struggle with, and I had to laugh about about not having certain conversations, because I think my teenager thinks that I have way too many of them with our children because things just come up. Things came up today, something comes up, and I was explaining why my son shouldn't use some term, and my teenager's sitting there, Mom, and I'm like, well, it's true, and if he walks around saying this, then it's not going to be great for him. So we just need to put it all out there now. So so sometimes I think maybe I say a little too much, or at least my teenager thinks so. And and I have an oldest that's a girl and a middle that's a boy, and so I'm kind of navigating them both as he's turning 12 and starting to hit puberty himself too. And so I feel like I'm barely getting a grasp on the girl side, and now it's time for the boy side of it. And so I find that, and it's different. I'm sure that Fletch and Kendra can tell you that doing the boys and the girls, it's different. They're different in a lot of ways. And so what I would do for one, I would not necessarily do for the other. And so learning to navigate that, and like Shannen said, doing it in front of them. All the time. We find that, we have some things going on with our extended family, and, we've had massive deaths in the family, and you don't get to get away from those things. Our kids, in some ways, we had my father-in-law die 7 years ago out of nowhere, and it was like they couldn't get away from the grief. They couldn't get away from, other family members that were in our home grieving, and I think that in some ways that was great, and it was, we walked that together, but in other ways I think that it impacted, especially my older daughter, more than I would have liked it to, because she had to live it. She had to see it. She couldn't get away from it. We couldn't, she was there with us, and so I think that's a dynamic in homeschooling that can be awesome, because they can see so many of our life struggles, of our personal things, and but it can also sometimes be be difficult, because when you are struggling at your most, and when you might want to kind of shelter the kids a little bit from it, you don't necessarily have that opportunity.
I think back on what you were talking about with having all these possibly what your daughter thinks are too early conversations or whatever. One of my friends who talks about this kind of stuff a lot says that it's not that we're getting the topics on the table, they're already there, and it's a matter of we have to let the kids know how we feel about these things, because they're going to know what everybody else feels. Brenda, you have not chimed in here. You got any thoughts you want to throw in?
I do. I have lots of thoughts. I was thinking about the whole parents communicating the issues with their kids or something, and how some of the homeschool graduates maybe felt they didn't get enough discussion like that. I definitely came from a family that didn't talk about stuff a lot. We didn't talk about anything. But I think a lot of perhaps newer homeschooling families are perhaps realizing that extreme sheltering may not be the best way to go, especially since the media images that we get today are even worse than they were in the 80s and whenever the homeschooling first started. I know that a lot of parents back then started homeschooling to sort of pull away from the world, and I think that's a reason that a lot of people still do it today. But I think that at least second generation homeschoolers, perhaps like I do, realize that there's a little bit of a difference between sheltering and perhaps hiding what goes on in the world, that it's important to be aware of the issues that are out there that they're going to face, that they're going to eventually run into, and be prepared for how to handle it, whether you do so from a religious base or just from a moral base if you don't feel particularly religious. But having that sort of guide of, these are things that are going to come up, and this is how we have chosen to handle them based on our belief system, and this is how we hope that you will handle them when you run across them. And I think that those are ongoing communications that you can have even from a young age. I know my daughter, she is 8, and she's run into so many things already that I didn't even know about until I was 15 or 16 years old. So it definitely, I think, is important in today's world to definitely keep those lines of communication open with your children, even as I think perhaps Fletch and Kendra were saying, even at a younger age than you think you ought to talk about them. So we're definitely going through a lot of stuff that I didn't really want to have to talk to my 8-year-old about, but we've gone ahead and started those lines of communication because as she reaches closer to the teen years, that it's definitely something I want her to come to me about. I don't want her to go to her friends or the internet, especially not the internet, about these questions. I want her to be able to know that I am a source that can communicate with her in a good way. And I think that that's something that's really important about keeping things real. And it's not just like the sexual topics necessarily, but just pretty much any topic that you face as an adult. I think it's really important. And we can do that, as I think Heidi, well, I think everybody was saying it, but since we're with the children all the time, any moment can be a teaching moment about something, whether it's about, oh, well, I'm super stressed right now and I'm freaking out. How do we handle that? So I think that those are definitely conversations that are easier to have with a child who's with you than with a child that perhaps hardly ever sees you and only sees like your company face. So I definitely think that that's something that's really important when you're trying to keep things real.
Fletch, you just look like you had something you needed to say there.
I apparently had that great look. I can say anything you want me to say, but you know, I again just to emphasize, we had spent so long of not avoiding topics, but just, you know, we were always going to talk about something, but we just didn't know when. We didn't know when. We didn't know when. Then we find out it's too late with some of them. And again, like Brenda said, not just topics pertaining to sex and babies, but just anything that maybe the world was bringing. I remember when I told Kendra, hey, we need to start talking about this. And so we did, and we started engaging culture a little bit more and talking about what the world was doing and what they were looking at, what they were listening to, and what they were saying. And the first thing I found is we just got devoured by the homeschool community. So what I want to say is, you know, there are people kind of walking these paths at different paces, and it's just that the kind of the reverse of competition. Just kind of, every family is doing that. So just because you're way ahead having these what you think are super edgy conversations, your neighbors might not be ready, or their kids may not be ready for those conversations yet. So again, it's just giving grace to one another to get there, and not think you kind of own the corner of the market. So that's all I want to say.
Well, I'll take a second to just make sure that y'all all know about the iHomeschool Network's Big Book of Homeschooling Ideas. It's the latest collaborative book published by iHomeschool Network, and it was just released in August, but is now available on Amazon in print and in Kindle format. This is wisdom from 55 moms sharing their expertise on 103 topics, from academics to extras, and spanning all ages and stages of homeschooling. So tons of good stuff in there. Let's see. I think we're getting close to the end of our time, but I want to make sure that everybody has had a chance to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about or weigh in. So let me know or jump in.
I just want to say that I want to take Fletch home with me so he can tell all the people around me how they need to keep it real. Can we have a little like Fletch bobblehead that talks or something, and we could like bring it around and be like, look, Fletch says that we need to keep it real and we all need to just be honest and give each other grace, because I totally think that would sell and that would be fabulous. So there's my 2 cents for the night, everybody.
Okay, that's awesome. I've been looking for things that we can market on Homeschooling IRL. Kendra, it's Fletch bobbleheads, because that's what we need, is my head, you know, bobbling around. You know, it's funny, I'll bring up one quick little thing, is a couple years ago I started a group called 411, and it was with, it's all kind of around these topics, and it was for homeschool kids. I was noticing that in the church, people weren't talking to their kids about some things, and I knew kids had questions. So I thought, what better way to name this group than 411, which is information, but it was based on 1 Timothy 4:11. And it was this idea that some of these older guys can talk to these younger guys. So I started with my son. He invited a friend, and I just said, you can just ask any question you want to ask. You're not going to shock me. Anything you want to ask. And they shocked me. Some of the questions, and I had to, the first time I had to catch my breath and say, oh, okay, that's a good question. But what happened was, a really fun story was a father brought his kid, and he was going to drop him off from my club. And I said, hey, why don't you sit in with us? He's like, oh, no, man, I can't do this. And he sat out in the living room with Kendra while I sat around this table with these boys. Well, I got a call, the next day from this dad saying, we had the best conversation on the way home because he was willing. Well, guess what happened? He was there the next week, and then other dads started joining me. And what I was going to say, and this is not just for dads, moms, husbands, wives, just be willing to put your foot in the water and be real with your kids or in your homeschool environment, or especially with other homeschoolers. Just be real and say, here's where I'm struggling. And you'll find that by being real, you'll attract other people. So yeah, a bobblehead's fantastic. That's a good idea. I like a bobblehead. I want a Kendra bobblehead too, so we can do a pair of them.
I just wanted to jump in real quick before we have to go, that I think it's also very, very important that we're real with non-homeschoolers, because I feel like so many of us put on this face like everything's wonderful. Of course it's wonderful because I'm keeping the kids home. I'm doing something that you think is weird and that I can't do it or whatever the reason is. And so we're always faced with, oh, but your kid doesn't know this, or your kid isn't advanced, or all of these different the status quo that we set for ourselves. So I know friends of mine, their husbands are having a hard time basically defending their family and saying, yes, we are homeschooling, no, my kid isn't in Mensa yet, and these type of things, because we put on that face for non-homeschoolers because we want to show them that we're doing a great thing, and we want to not necessarily recruit people, but at least get people to understand where we're coming from. And for people who are just nervous about how that looks for their family, to get over that and just look at it from the educational point of view, from like instilling your family values and those type of things. So just, even if your kid is cheating on math, well, you know what, the public school kids are cheating on math too. So it's not that big of a deal to say, oh, we struggled with this thing. It's one piece of the pie. It doesn't mean that we throw the whole thing away. So that's my little soapbox for the night.
Yeah, I love that point, Shannen, because I think we do that a lot. It's especially if we're feeling, I guess, a little bit judged or whatever. It's we want to, maybe not prove ourselves right, but defend the homeschool community by making it sound good. But I've actually found in my family, I had a cousin who just interrogated me the first couple of years we homeschooled, and I was, like, what is the deal? And then a year or so later, she started homeschooling. But I think it was, a lot of it was genuine curiosity because she was thinking about it. And I feel like also if we can decode it, then we don't do those people who might be considering it somewhere in the back of their minds any favors, because it's not going to be all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah, and then inevitably what happens when we're transparent about our own struggles is it opens the door for somebody else to say, oh, me too. And it's just like a waterfall of grace in those conversations. I can't tell you how just finally coming to grips with the fact that I'm not perfect and I don't have to put out this perfect homeschool mom thing, it's opened doors to ministry and really loving people well, and our kids sense that too. That's the best thing, is our kids feel like it's safe. And Brenda was talking about opening lines of communication, always are the main thing with them, and they will find that they can come to you and be super honest and transparent, and and you're safe. So who better for them to turn to than the people who just love them the most on this earth?
If y'all have any more just closing, if you have clothing thoughts, that's great too. I like clothes. But closing thoughts, jump on in because we're going to have to wrap this up in just a few. All righty. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks so much to our special guests, Kendra and Fletch. I look forward to the announcement of the Fletch bobblehead dolls coming out, and and the Kendra ones too. Want to hear what their little button presses to say there. Anyway, thanks again for joining us, to all the panelists too, and your good input. And you can find all the Hangouts on ihomeschoolnetwork.com/hangouts. Please circle us on G+ and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.